It's easier to loosen this tie rod nut before you undo the actual tie rod. I'm changing out the inner tie rods too. There we go. Remove the cotter pin on the outer tie rod. This is a 27 millimeter. So when I get my tie rods ends off, I'll put the nut back on it and I screw it down right till it's almost flush with the top of the nut, and then I'm going to pop it out with a hammer. It's loose, just tapping it out right now. I'm going to remove the stabilizer link that's connected to the control arm. You really want a service wrench or a thin wrench to be able to get on the back side here. I don't have one, so I'm just going to pry it in there. Cool. Pop that out. So the bottom of this strut, or shock, whatever you want to call it, is a 19. Actually, before I finish taking that off, I'm going to try on take off the bottom skid plates here. We're going to take off the bottom skid plates. Okay, to remove the skid plate, we've got 2 there and 2 in the back. Alright, so when I go to remove these lower control arm bolts, you can see here the steering rack and or the inner tie rod is getting in the way. Well, I'm doing the inner tie rods, so I'm going to pull off the inner tie rods and see if that will give it clearance. I'm going to count these turns. 1, 2, 3, 11 and a half. It's not a big deal to do that steering rack. I've already changed out the bushings, and if you are going to do this job and you need to loosen them up, you might as well change out the bushings too. They're cheap and it will really tighten up your steering if it's loose, that is. So just loosen up these. Changing the center tie rod is a breeze. Wait till you see this tool I got. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but if you haven't, go rent it from AutoZone. You rent it and then you return it. You get your money back. Alright, so here's that tool I was talking to you about. It's Master Inner Tie Rod tool set. You rent this thing out, been using it for years. You pick whatever size is for the inner tie rod, lock it into this guy, and then you just put your ratchet and spin it on off. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. There we go. Oops. Boom. And it doesn't look like we're going to clear it. So I just wanted to say, if you were going to do your outer tie rods or your inner tie rods, it'd be easier, but it does not look like it's going to clear it. So that's unfortunate. All right, before I start undoing the steering rack, I'm going to go ahead and remove this inner tie rod too, because I'm doing both sides. Okay, back with the 22. We're going to take off that first bolt right there. Alright, now on the back side here, you reach through, there's going to be a bolt. You're going to have to hold it with I'm able to hold it with my hands. Like I said, I just did this about a month ago. Pop that guy off. We can slide that whole bolt off. So we got a washer, a nut, and this will just slide out the back. There we go. Okay. Now we have another bolt that is going to be, it's this one right here, but we have to access it from the top. Wiggle on out of there. My other camera died and I'm not home to recharge it, but I removed this bolt, and this is just a bolt up here, and that's going to allow me to move this out to remove this bolt here and the one right here. Alright, so I'm going to use some nail polish to mark these so I know exactly where they were. I'm going to do that on all of them, and they're going to be color coded so I know which bolts go where. Okay, the marks aren't perfect, but hopefully they'll get me back to where I need to go to get to the alignment shop. I'm ready to get... Alright, so this piece pops off. I'm gonna use this to kind of, I got a jack just holding it up to take any, and I'll pound that out. I popped the back off. Let's check this out. I was taking this side off, and the bolt, come on, focus. The bolt froze in the actual aluminum kind of supporter thing that runs through it. Look at that. That's fun. Yeah. Alright, so I decided to do the upper control arms because I have to wait for bolts to be ordered for the lower control arm, because these guys are rusted in here really good. I sprayed them really good. I've been trying to bang them out, but they are rusted good, so I'm probably going to have to cut them off. And it's Labor Day, so I can't get these parts in. So I decided to do the upper control arms. So in order to do the upper control arms, we have to remove the battery, because the bolt, I'll get a better picture of it, but you can't get it out without removing the battery cable down here. So I'm gonna remove that. All right, so I took out the battery. You can see we have to remove this thing right here. So the bolt and this thing will slide aside, and that's the bolt. That thing's super rusty. That's how it will pull right out. And I think these are just two 10mm right there. I'm also removing this. This just slides up because I dropped the bolt right there. So these are all just 10mm to remove. There we go. See, now I can get that bolt straight out. So to get this bolt out here, I used a mixture of banging it super hard all along here, some Freol, and this clamp right here, because I wanted to save these. I don't want to destroy my upper ball joints because I just put them on a year ago. And you might be able to get to this, you just kind of pry this back a little bit, and we're going to put a 19 right here and a 19 wrench on the other side like this. So when you're pulling these upper control arms out, this bolt ain't coming with it. You might have to just barely bend that little fender piece in, not too much. Those bolts don't come, or the washers don't come out with it. And it'd probably be easier to have someone lift up the other side of the control arm when you're pulling it out, but there we go, that's out. There's a new upper, old. Alright, we're gonna get back in place here. Alright, so when you're putting these upper control arms back in, get the bolt in there, let it sit there because it's not gonna pass through. And then I have to maneuver it till we get it to slide. There you go. And then again, these washers, they got a concave. The concave is going to go inwards like that. So I'm just gonna finger tight up the nut, then I'm gonna put the ball joint in, because I'm not gonna tighten this up all the way, so I can still move this up and down. So on the passenger side, there's another little bracket right there. It's got two 10mm bolts that stops it. Just come right out. All right, for the upper control arm, we're torquing it to 87 foot-pounds. Like I said, I'm gonna wait for the actual ball joint till it's sitting on the ground, I think. Work this up. All right, so when I was in here cutting off the lower control arm bolts, I basically got my blade as far as I could up against this frame here and cut straight down on both sides. And I did that on all four bolts. So if you look at my front tabs here, you can see they're kind of bent out. They've been bending them and bending them back in when they set alignment. So I got a piece of this 1/4 by 36 inches to kind of make them tabs just for reinforcements. I used a little stick here that I broke off about the same size, and I'll just cut those. I'm just kind of trying to bend them in a little bit. hopefully I didn't make it worse than it was, but I think that shall do for reinforcements. Okay, so something tells me I should have removed these bump stops before I took it off the vehicle. It's got a pipe wrench here. One over here. So I'm going to start by putting on the lower ball joint, attach that to the knuckle first. It does have a little grease fitting here. Let's go ahead and screw that into the side. So these Moog ball joints, they got an L for left. That's the passenger or the driver's side left. So it's going to be a size 17 socket. Use some blue Loctite on these guys. So I'm just going to get these as tight as I can for now, because you can see I can't really get them too tight because the lower control arm's not on yet, but I'm just going to put those two in. Then once I get the lower control arm on, I'll tighten these up really tight and I'll put the other two in. So when I took all the bolts out of the control arm, I labeled them like left rear and left front, just so I wouldn't get them mixed up. But since the tubes kind of froze in there, I had to go out and buy tubes. These were $64 a piece. Okay, so let me show you the order of these. So I'm going to refer to this as the big bolt. Okay, you're going to have the big bolt in the very front and the big bolt in the very back. Then we're going to have a washer here, and then the tube, which goes through from this side. The tube will go through from this side, and then on the back we have that hexagon. To try to keep these from seizing up, I am going to put some grease on the bolts. I'm not going to put it on the back sides here because that's where it's going to go up to the frame of the truck, and you don't want that to be sliding around. So I'll just grease this up. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to snug these up, and we'll tighten them after the vehicle's sitting on the ground. So when you put these together, I kept calling these hexagons. These aren't quite hexagons. If you look closely, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and then it's kind of rounded right here. So here's the one I just used yesterday. It was brand new, but as you can see, this doesn't fit now on this cam bolt. So when you line them up, see how it sits perfectly like that? If they're not lined up perfectly, see how both the notches on top, and I'll show you once it's on the truck, but when I started to drive the bolt through into it, not only did it round off my bolt, but it also, if you look in there, you see them shreds that it started pushing out those shreds, so I can't even fit the thing in there, and somehow it warped this one. So when you do it, put this through first, hook this on like it should be so it's lined up and it's secure. Not secure, but it's going to be, I don't know if I can do it here one-handed, it's upside down. Okay, so it's like this, have that tight, and then run your bolt through. And and have that tight as you're tightening up that bolt into the sleeve. So I'll show you what that looks like before I do it. But so I basically ruined this, I ruined this and this by not having them lined up. I think I had them like just off a little bit and started tightening it. So just keep that in mind. Save you some money, because just this part right here was 76 bucks, and that was with a discount. A lot of money. Okay, so I'm over here on the passenger side. We're gonna take the sleeve with that, all the ticks and stuff that's gonna be lined up at the top. Okay, just like that. We're gonna take the bolt, which I have grease up in this one too. And again, all the ticks are gonna be up at the top. We'll line that up. Okay, so there's the one lined up on the back. And there's no gap in between it. No gap, so I know it's fully seated within that bolt, or within that nut. And then I'm gonna take my bolt right here. And I'm also gonna put grease along this part. Got the grease on there. And then I'm gonna slide this through. Oh, I dropped it. So that's what that's gonna look like. And the other side. And for the backs, so the Moog lower ball joints come pre-greased, but grease them up a little bit, and I'd recommend doing that before you actually connect it to the lower control arm, because once the lower control arm's on there, it's kind of hard to get a grease gun in there unless you have like an angled one. So we're gonna go ahead and put the shock bolt through. I'm gonna use a jack just to kind of help me out here. Line up the bottom strut. I'm gonna put the bolt through the back here, and then the washer goes on the outside with the nut. Washer, then the nut. Put the stabilizer link back through. So when you're torquing back up the steering rack, you'll have to do the driver's side to 141 foot-pounds. I'm gonna have to set the camera down. My other camera died again, but it's 141 foot-pounds for the driver's side. And the top bolt goes to 123 foot-pounds. And for the center one, it's gonna get 123 foot-pounds as well. And that's a 19. All right, the inner front tie rod gets torqued to 50 foot-pounds. So the clamps that came off aren't really good for the boot that goes on the inner tie rod. I picked up this set for like $5 to $10, and it's got a whole ton of different sizes. So I'm going to size this up and put those on. There we go. There's the front and the back. Now we're going to put the outer tie rod on. You see here, the outer tie rods are labeled L, and when I put them on, it was 11.5 turns. So I'm going to try to turn this 11.5 turns. So I should probably start facing down, because I had 11.5 turns. I need to land facing up. Don't forget to put your ring on. 1. Okay, so for the 4 bolts that go connect the ball joint to the knuckle, that's going to be 59 foot-pounds. The outer tie rod is going to be 67 foot-pounds. So the lower ball joint right here, that's going to be torqued to 112. So the bolt right here for the lower shock is 112 foot-pounds. Your lower control arm, these are going to be torqued to 96. once the car's sitting on the ground. 96 for the front and back, both sides. And don't forget to put your cotter pin through the lower ball joint, along with your upper ball joint and your tie rod.